In the vast expanse of space, size had always mattered. The Galactic Council's massive warships stretched for kilometers, their gleaming hulls casting shadows across entire moons. When humanity first ventured beyond their solar system, their vessels seemed almost comical in comparison. Compact, utilitarian ships that barely registered on the Council's advanced scanning systems. "Look at these primitives," Admiral Zextal had sneered during the first contact, his crystalline appendages clicking with amusement as he addressed the Council. "Their largest vessel is smaller than our cargo shuttles. Their entire fleet could fit in one of our hangar bays." The assembled representatives chittered and buzzed with laughter, their mockery echoing through the grand chamber. But Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force hadn't flinched. Standing before the towering alien dignitaries, she maintained her composure, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Size isn't everything. Honored council members," she'd said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Sometimes the smallest predators are the most dangerous." They should have heeded her warning. When the swarm attacked from deep space 6 months later, the mighty Council fleet found itself overwhelmed. Their enormous ships, while impressive, were slow to maneuver and easier to target. One by one, the behemoths fell to the countless biological projectiles launched by the insectoid invaders. In their desperation, the Council turned to the humans they had once mocked. That's when they witnessed something extraordinary. The human fleet moved like a school of fish, darting between the massive swarm ships with impossible agility. Their smaller size made them difficult to target, while their coordinated tactics allowed them to strike at critical points with surgical precision. "Their ships," whispered First Speaker Tulera in awe, watching the tactical display as human vessels wove through the chaos of battle. "They're not just small, they're intentionally designed this way." The truth dawned on the Council slowly. Humans hadn't built tiny ships because they were primitive. They'd built them because they understood something fundamental about warfare that the Council had forgotten in their pursuit of impressive size and power. Maneuverability, adaptability, and teamwork could overcome raw power. Lieutenant Alex Thompson piloted his corvette through a gap in the swarm's formation that would have been impossible for a Council vessel to navigate. His squadron followed close behind, their weapons precisely targeting the weak points they'd identified in the enemy's biological armor. Just like drilling for oil rigs back in the Gulf, he transmitted to his team, his southern drawl carrying a note of satisfaction. Small holes in the right places can bring down the biggest structures. But just as humanity's innovative tactics began to turn the tide, the swarm unveiled something new, something that made even the battle-hardened human pilots pause. The space around the primary swarm vessel began to distort, reality itself seeming to bend and twist. The tactical displays on every human ship lit up with warnings, their sensors detecting energy readings that defied their understanding of physics. As Captain Chen watched from the bridge of her flagship, she realized this battle was about to enter a phase that would test not just humanity's tactical advantages, but their very understanding of what was possible in space warfare. She opened a channel to all human ships, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "All vessels, maintain formation. Whatever they're about to throw at us, remember, we're humanity's tiny fleet, and we're about to show them why that's exactly what we want it to be." The space around them continued to warp, and every pilot knew that what happened next would either validate humanity's approach to space warfare or prove that sometimes bigger truly was better. The distortion in space continued to grow, spreading like ripples in a pond. Captain Chen's mind flashed back to her academy days, to the simulations they'd run of spatial anomalies. Nothing had prepared her for this. The swarm's massive flagship pulsed with an eerie bioluminescent glow, its organic hull seeming to breathe as it channeled impossible amounts of energy. "Engineering, what are we looking at?" Chen demanded, her eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of spacetime before them. Chief Engineer David Powell's voice crackled over the comm, stress evident in his usually calm tone. "Whatever it is, Captain, it's bending gravity itself. The readings match some of our theoretical research into space folding, but they're achieving it through biological means. It's beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way." The Council ships, still maintaining their distance, transmitted urgent warnings across all frequencies. Fall back. First speaker Tilera's desperate message echoed through the command channel. Your vessels are too small to withstand the gravitational forces. You'll be torn apart. But Captain Chen had served with her fleet for 15 years. She'd watched these crews train, innovate, and overcome every challenge thrown their way. Humanity hadn't survived on Earth by running from the unknown. They'd survived by understanding it and adapting. All ships, maintain tactical formation Delta, she ordered, her voice steady. Powell, redirect power to the inertial dampeners. Squadron leaders, report status. The responses came back crisp and professional, despite the fear they all must have felt. The tiny human fleet adjusted their formation, spreading out like a net around the anomaly. Years of drilling had made their movements precise, coordinated. Each ship knew its role, its place in the greater strategy. Lieutenant Thompson's squadron took point, their corvette's sensors gathering data on the phenomenon. Captain, we're detecting something inside the distortion, he reported. It's like the space is being folded to create a gateway. But the energy signature doesn't match anything in our database. The swarm vessels began moving into a new configuration, their biological ships pulsing in synchronization. The pattern was familiar to any human who'd studied Earth's oceans. It resembled a school of predatory fish preparing to strike. They're not just creating a weapon, Chen realized, her eyes widening. They're creating a door. But to where? The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior sensor operator, fresh out of training, noticed something in the background radiation. Captain, the quantum signatures. They match theoretical models of parallel dimension bridges. The swarm isn't just bending space. They're trying to bring something through. The revelation sent chills through the bridge crew. Humanity had theorized about parallel dimensions, but the energy requirements had made exploration impossible. The swarm had somehow solved that problem through biological means, and whatever they were calling through that spatial tier, it couldn't be good. Ken's mind raced through options. The Council's massive ships might have the firepower to disrupt the gateway, but they'd never get close enough. The human fleet's smaller size and maneuverability gave them a chance, but one wrong move in those gravitational forces would be fatal. Powell. She called over the comm. Remember that crazy idea you had about using our engine's resonance frequencies to disrupt spatial anomalies? The one that got me laughed out of the last engineering conference. Powell replied, a note of excitement creeping into his voice. Captain, it's completely untested. We'd have to modify our engine outputs on the fly, coordinate the entire fleet's resonance patterns. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Just the kind of crazy that might work. Patch me through to all ships. All ships, listen carefully. Chen's voice carried across the fleet channels. We're going to attempt something that's never been done before. Each squadron will need to modify their engine outputs to create a resonance pattern. If we time this right, we might be able to disrupt whatever the swarm is trying to pull through that portal. The fleet's response was immediate. Despite the unprecedented nature of the plan, every crew moved with practiced precision. This was why humanity had succeeded where others failed, their ability to adapt, to try the impossible when backed into a corner. Powell's instructions flowed through the technical channels, guiding each ship's engineering team through the necessary modifications. The resonance has to be perfect, he emphasized. Think of it like a choir. Every voice has its part, and together we create something powerful enough to shatter glass. Except in this case, we're trying to shatter space itself. The swarm noticed their movements. Their massive ships began to shift, organic tendrils of energy reaching out to intercept the human fleet. But this was where the tiny ships proved their worth again. Like schools of fish evading a whale, the human vessels slit through gaps the swarm couldn't possibly cover. Portal stability at 80% and climbing, reported the sensor operator, her voice tense. Something massive is beginning to emerge. Through the swirling vortex, shapes became visible, massive, dark forms that seemed to absorb light itself. The Council ships, still watching from a safe distance, began registering unprecedented energy readings. Captain, Thompson called out, his usually steady voice wavering slightly, these readings, whatever's coming through, it's bigger than anything we've ever encountered. Even the Council's largest ships would look like toys in comparison. Chen watched as her fleet moved into position, each squadron finding its place in the carefully choreographed dance they were about to perform. She thought about Earth, about humanity's journey to the stars. They'd always been the underdogs, always had to think differently to survive. Now, facing a threat from beyond their own dimension, they would prove once again why size wasn't everything. "Begin resonance sequence," she ordered. The fleet's engines changed their pitch, creating harmonics that rippled through space itself. Powell had described it as playing the universe like a musical instrument, and now Chen understood what he meant. She could feel the vibrations through her ship's hull, a symphony of technology aimed at one impossible goal. The swarm reacted violently. Their biological ships began emitting counter-frequencies, trying to stabilize the portal. The space between the two forces became a battlefield of competing waves, reality itself seeming to flutter like a flag in a storm. Portal stability dropping. The sensor operator called out. 60%, 55%, wait. The entities are accelerating their emergence. Through the destabilizing portal, massive tentacles of dark energy began to reach out, probing the space around them. The temperature in the region plummeted, instruments began to fail, and even the Council ships started backing away further. "Maintain formation," Chen ordered as several ships wavered under the increasing gravitational stress. "Powell, we need more power to the resonance fields." "The engines are already at 110%, Captain." Powell's voice was strained. "Any more and we risk tearing our own ships apart." The dark entities were now halfway through the portal, their true forms still hidden in the swirling vortex, but their presence felt by every soul in the fleet. Warning alarms blared across every ship as systems were pushed beyond their limits. Chen watched as her crew worked their stations, each person focused entirely on their task despite the impossible odds they faced. This was humanity's greatest strength, not their technology or their tactics, but their absolute refusal to give up even when facing the impossible. "All ships," she broadcast, her voice carrying the weight of Earth's future, "prepare for emergency power surge on my mark. We either end this now, or we become the first line of defense against whatever's coming through that portal." The dark entities reached further into normal space, their presence causing reality itself to buckle. Every ship in the human fleet groaned under the strain, their hulls creaking as they maintained their precision formation. In the next few moments, they would either make history or become part of it. Just as Chen was about to give the order for emergency power surge, a new signal cut through their communications. "Captain, unknown vessels approaching from Sector 7. The tactical officer shouted, his eyes fixed on the long-range sensors. Through the chaos of battle emerged a sight that made even the seasoned bridge crew pause. A fleet of ships even smaller than humanity's vessels, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly iridescence. "This is Commander Ren of the Ancestral Guard." A clear voice transmitted across all frequencies. "We've been tracking the swarm's dimensional experiments for millennia. Your resonance strategy is correct, but your implementation needs adjustment." The newcomers' ships moved with impossible grace, weaving between the human vessels as if gravity itself bent to their will. They were barely larger than Earth's fighter craft, yet they radiated power that made the sensors struggle to maintain lock. More tiny ships. First speaker Tilura's voice carried equal parts confusion and hope. "The universe seems intent on proving our prejudices wrong today." Chen didn't hesitate. Years of command had taught her when to lead and when to listen. "Commander Ren, we're open to suggestions. Our engines are at their limits, and those entities are nearly through." The Ancestral Guard ships took up positions between the human vessels, creating a complex geometric pattern that somehow felt familiar. Powell's excited voice came over the comm. "Captain, they're engine signatures. They're matching our resonance frequency, but adding something. It's like they're completing a pattern we didn't know we were making." The dark entities seemed to sense the change. Their emergence slowed, the tentacles of void energy recoiling slightly. The swarm ships began to pulse more rapidly, their biological technology struggling to maintain the portal's stability. "Your species understands harmony," Commander Ren transmitted, "but what you need is discord. The entities feed on synchronization. To disrupt them, we must become chaos itself. Understanding dawned on Chen's face. They've been anticipating our patterns, countering our coordinated attacks. Powell, can you randomize our engine resonance? That goes against everything we know about stable field generation. Powell protested, then paused. Which might be exactly what we need. But Captain, randomizing the fields could tear our ships apart from the inside. The dark entities renewed their push, and space itself screamed in protest. Several of the Council's massive ships began reporting critical system failures just from the proximity to the dimensional tear. But the tiny vessels, both human and ancestral, held their positions. All ships, Chen broadcast, her voice steady despite the growing chaos around them. Prepare to implement random resonance patterns on my mark. Each ship will generate its own unique frequency. Engineering teams route all available power to structural integrity fields. The ancestral guard ships began to glow with an inner light, their technology responding to the human fleet's preparations. Commander Wren's voice carried a note of approval. You understand quickly, Captain. Perhaps this is why your ships evolved as they did. Sometimes the universe prepares us for battles we don't yet know we must fight. The dark entities had pushed nearly 3/4 of their mass through the portal now. The temperature dropped further, and the void between the stars seemed to deepen. Several of the swarm's smaller ships simply vanished, consumed by the growing darkness. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Thompson's voice was tense as his squadron reported increasing structural stress. Chen took a deep breath, looking at the tactical display one last time. The tiny human fleet, once mocked by the Council, now stood as the front line against an interdimensional invasion. Alongside them, an ancient race had arrived in ships that proved size truly had nothing to do with power. And between their combined forces, a tier in reality waited to be either sealed or torn wide open. All ships, she commanded, her words carrying the weight of two civilizations' hopes. Initiate random resonance patterns. Now. The space around them erupted into a cacophony of competing frequencies as each ship began generating its own unique vibration. The combined effect was like throwing a handful of gravel into a perfectly still pond, chaos rippling out in every direction at once. But whether this chaos would be enough to drive back the darkness remained to be seen. The combined fleet's random resonance patterns created a symphony of chaos that rippled through space-time itself. Each ship vibrated to its own unique frequency, their small size allowing them to withstand forces that would have torn larger vessels apart. The dark entities, so close to breaking through into our dimension, suddenly found themselves caught in a web of conflicting energies. It's working. Powell's voice carried over the comm system. The portal's stability is dropping rapidly. 30%, 25%, 20%. The swarm ships responded with desperate intensity, their biological technology pulsing with previously unseen patterns. But for the first time, their coordination worked against them. The organized nature of their attack made them vulnerable to the chaos being generated by the smaller ships. Now we understand, Commander Wren transmitted, their voice carrying ancient wisdom. The swarm didn't mock humanity's fleet because of arrogance alone. They feared it. Your ship's design accidentally echoed our own ancient victory over these entities. They sought to destroy that knowledge before you could discover it. The dark entities began to retreat, their massive form pulling back through the dimensional tear. But as they withdrew, something unexpected happened. The void energy they'd brought with them didn't dissipate. It began to coalesce around the swarm ships. All vessels, maintain your positions. Chen ordered as several ships began to drift from the strain. Powell, what are we looking at? The chief engineer's response was filled with awe. The random frequencies aren't just closing the portal, Captain. They're creating a resonance cascade. The entities are being pulled back, but they're dragging the swarm with them. The massive swarm ships, their biological hulls now entangled with the retreating void energy, fought against the pull of the closing dimensional tier. Their once coordinated movements became erratic, desperate. The smaller ships of the human fleet and ancestral guard maintained their chaotic pattern, each one adding to the force driving the invasion back. This is not a victory you want to celebrate. First Speaker Lara warned, the Council ships still maintaining their safe distance. The knowledge of dimensional bridging. It cannot be allowed to. But her transmission cut off as the void energy surrounding the swarm ships suddenly pulsed with blinding intensity. In that moment, Chen understood. They're not trying to retreat, she broadcast to all ships. They're trying to take us with them. Time seemed to slow as tendrils of darkness reached out from the dying portal, seeking to ensnare the smaller ships. But here, finally, the true genius of humanity's fleet design revealed itself. The tiny vessels could slip through gaps in the energy field that larger ships could never navigate. What had once been mockery had become salvation. Break formation. Chen commanded. Each ship, plot your own escape vector. Use the random patterns to your advantage. The space around the portal became a dance of light and shadow as human and ancestral ships wove through the reaching tendrils. The void energy, programmed to anticipate coordinated movements, couldn't adapt to the chaos of individual ships acting independently. With a final, reality-bending surge, the portal collapsed in on itself. The swarm ships, their biological technology now fully entangled with the dark entities, were pulled back through the dimensional tear. The void energy dissipated like smoke in a storm, leaving behind a silence that felt almost holy. As the remaining ships regrouped, Captain Chen received a private transmission from Commander Ren. Your people were not merely lucky in designing small ships, they said. You understood instinctively what we learned through millennia of war, that survival often depends not on overwhelming force, but on being overlooked long enough to strike at the perfect moment. But as the fleets began their damage assessment, a single swarm ship, smaller than the others and previously unnoticed, emerged from behind a field of debris. Its organic hull pulsed with a frequency that matched neither the portal's energy nor the swarm's usual patterns. Before any of the vessels could react, it transmitted a message that would haunt Chen's dreams for years to come. Thank you for the demonstration, tiny fleet. Now we know how to replicate chaos. The ship vanished into faster-than-light travel before anyone could intercept it, leaving the combined fleets to contemplate a victory that had suddenly become something far more complex. In the days following the battle, the combined fleets gathered at the Council's main station for an emergency summit. The massive gathering hall, once a place where humanity's tiny ships had been mocked, now felt different. Representatives from all species sat together, their previous hierarchy forgotten in light of what they'd witnessed. The universe has taught us a costly lesson about presumption. First Speaker Lara addressed the assembly, her crystalline form reflecting the starlight from the station's massive viewing windows. We thought size and power were interchangeable. We were wrong. Captain Chen stood at the podium next, her uniform still bearing the scorch marks from the battle. What we learned today goes beyond ship design or battle tactics. The swarm didn't fear our fleet because of its size. They feared it because it represented something they couldn't control, innovation born from necessity. Commander Ren, their iridescent form barely reaching Chen's shoulder, joined her at the podium. For millennia, my people guarded the knowledge of the dark entities, watching civilizations rise and fall. We waited for a species that would naturally evolve the right approach to combat them. Humanity did not disappoint. The council chambers erupted in discussion as sensor logs from the battle were displayed. The dance of the tiny ships through the void energy, each one moving independently yet contributing to the greater chaos that had sealed the dimensional tear, was a testament to both human ingenuity and the ancestral guard's ancient wisdom. Powell, still running calculations on his data pad, shared his findings with the assembled engineers. The random resonance patterns we generated weren't just effective, they were revolutionary. Each ship's unique frequency created a kind of dimensional static that the entities couldn't adapt to. It's not about size, it's about unpredictability. But Lieutenant Thompson voiced the concern that weighed on everyone's minds. That last swarm ship, it learned something from us, something that could make them more dangerous than ever. Chet nodded, her expression thoughtful. They learned that chaos can be a weapon, but they missed the most important lesson. Chaos isn't something you can control or replicate. It comes from giving your people the freedom to act independently, to trust their instincts. The Ancestral Guard offered to share their millennia of knowledge with humanity, while the Council proposed a new defense initiative that would focus on developing smaller, more agile vessels. The era of massive warships was ending, giving way to a new understanding of space warfare. As the summit concluded, Chen found herself back on her ship's observation deck, watching the stars. Commander Ren joined her, their small form radiating ancient power. "Your species' greatest strength," they observed, "isn't your technology or even your adaptability. It's your ability to turn your perceived weaknesses into advantages." "What happens now?" Chen asked, her eyes fixed on the distant stars where that final swarm ship had vanished. "Now," Ren replied, "we prepare. The swarm will return, thinking they understand chaos because they witnessed it. But they'll never truly comprehend what makes smaller civilizations so resilient. The ability to act independently while working together, that's something that can't be replicated in a lab or forced through biological engineering." Chen smiled, watching as her fleet conducted maneuvers alongside the Ancestral Guard ships. The once mocked, tiny fleet moved with practiced grace, each vessel flowing like water around the larger Council ships. They had proven that being underestimated could be the greatest tactical advantage of all. "Size isn't everything," she murmured, repeating her words from that first Council meeting. "But wisdom is learning to use what you have, exactly as you are." The stars twinkled in response, holding the promise of future adventures and challenges. The story of humanity's tiny fleet had begun as a tale of mockery, transformed into one of victory, and now stood as a testament to an eternal truth. Sometimes the smallest things in the universe carry the greatest power, the power to change everything.